your own sibling is like an aunt or an uncle, and they think parenting is easy because they see the nephew or niece for a few hours, like that's the easy part. Hey, you got to take them to the park, but you didn't see them when they were sick or nappies needed to be changed at 2:00 in the morning, or when, it's around dinner time and they're hungry and tired and all that kind of stuff. From my side, I probably had a very easy introduction.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue podcast, the show where we talk about the successes and the stresses of becoming a dad and being a dad. My name is Lawrence and I am your host. Thank you so much for listening today. A quick reminder, as always, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to get in touch with the show or sign up to be a guest on a future episode. Today's guest is Grant. Grant is based in Australia, and he used to be a coach to kind of young people, taking them to very high levels. He is the father to 2 children. We talk about how Grant became a stepfather and how that looked a bit different to them when welcoming in his newborn baby into the world a few years later and what different challenges that brought. We talk a little bit about getting kids involved into sports, especially from having his own coaching background. And he also gives some top tips to guys for maximising their health and maximising their energy and exercise levels as being parents. So much to talk about. So let's get into the conversation. Grant, thanks so much for joining us on the Dad Dialogue podcast today. Can you just start off by telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself and your family?
Okay, sure. Well, good to be here. Thank you. Father of 2. My eldest is about to turn 13. He's actually my stepson, but I've been involved in his life since he was about 18 months old. And just between you and I think I might have fallen for him before I fell for my wife. Like, I actually just loved being with him. And then I've got a daughter who's about to turn 10, going on probably 16. And then I've got my wife and I have a sort of a theme called Propel, and we have Propel Fit, which is a gym, Propel Health, which is a supplement manufacturing business, and then my wife has another one, Propel Property Developments, where she's buys a house and then renovates it and then sells it. So keeps us busy.
I was just about to say, it sounds like you keep yourselves busy for sure.
Yes. My passion is I don't know. They're all, I guess, my passion, but you can imagine in the gym, and that's my career. I'm an exercise physiologist, strength and conditioning coach, used to work with elite athletes, and I'm more interested in helping people with their health. And I love it, but it's bookends of the day, typically mornings and evenings. And you're working so hard, Lawrence, in today's world about you're just trying to promote people to be fitter and healthier and stuff like that. So anyway, it keeps us busy.
No, it's awesome. Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting topic. We can definitely dive into it a little bit in terms of the health space. As I just mentioned to you before, like, it's definitely a topic that if any dad out there isn't thinking about it, they should be thinking about it. And it's definitely one of those things for me that kind of creeps up as an anxiety from time to time of just like, am I doing enough to ensure that I'm going to be here for, like, to see my kids graduate, to see my kids get married and all these sorts of things, like, because my dad didn't see these things for me. So it does kind of like, it does creep in. And I think there's a healthy way to approach it. I don't think it should come from a place of anxiety and stress, but if people aren't thinking about it, then I think they should be thinking about it to making those choices. So we can definitely dive into that as well. I'm curious to pick up on what you said about your son, with that you fell for him before your wife. I have had one guest on the show before who's a stepfather, and it was really interesting kind of hearing his side of the story. So can you tell me a little bit about what that looked like? So getting involved with your now wife when she had this 18-month-old, what did that look like?
Oh, well, there's a little bit more to it. So for a lot of my life, especially my adult life, and you can probably hear that I've got a South African accent. I'm now living in Australia. I moved here very, very early in my career. I'd had my degree, I'd had my honors, and a little bit of experience in South Africa when I came across. So I had this drive to succeed within the strength and conditioning, athletic development world. I wanted to work with elite athletes, and my primary professional goal was to take an athlete to the pinnacle of their sport, which in my case, at the stage, was working with tennis players and preparing them for Wimbledon. I've kind of felt that Wimbledon was the pinnacle of tennis, their sport. Anyway, so I met my wife at the Commonwealth Games. I was down there in Melbourne, 2006. And I met her there, and I kind of liked her from the start. She begrudgingly took my phone number, didn't contact me for a while. I think I hassled her. And anyway, at that stage, 2006, I'd been in the country in Australia about 3 years, and nothing could distract me from working with athletes and my career.
Mm,
So I saw my wife a few times. Obviously not as a wife back then,
mm,
but I saw her a few times. I really, really liked her, but I just refused to give myself the opportunity to actually form a relationship.
mm,
We stayed in contact a bit. You can imagine when you travel, we're working with athletes, there's a fair amount of travel. You'd go overseas for
mm,
long periods of time. It just wasn't conducive to having any kind of relationship, and my mindset was not in that place. Anyway, we drifted apart. She then got married to someone else, and years later, maybe around 2013, I think it was, we reconnected. One thing that happened is pre- kind of achieved my goal of preparing athletes. So I was looking at the next phase of my career, which was always to move from the employed um, sector. I was working for
mm,
tennis national sporting organizations, like in that case, Tennis Australia, and I went into work for myself, like create my own
mm,
business. And the other thing was to more focus on health and that kind of stuff. So anyway, at that time, she was separated and going through a divorce, and we just reconnected, and I always liked it. As I said, it was just more the other things got in the way, or probably my own
mm.
mindset. And the little Oliver was there, and most if he was around, then I would spend most of the time sort of playing with him, and we took him to swings and stuff. And our dates were less dates and more sort of play dates. Going to
Mm,
the park, and then I started taking him swimming and teaching him that kind of stuff. So I sort of joke about that, but there's an element of truth. I just love being a dad to this little kid.
mm,
Yeah, and so yeah, it does come with its own challenges, obviously. But at the time, you just kind of, or not at the time, all the time, you just kind of work through those challenges and see what they are, and then kind of work around or through or whatever the case is. So yeah, that's sort of the origin of the story.
mm. So during that time of kind of coming getting involved in his life, what was the biological dad? Did they kind of stick around? Is he still alive? Because obviously
Oh
18 months. Okay.
Oh, lovely guy. We got a good relationship.
Mm,
My wife has a good relationship with him as well. It's yeah. So there's no animosity there. There's no anything
mm,
like that. Um, I was not the cause of any kind of divorce or anything or any separation. It all
mm,
happened sort of before sort of Leash and I
mm,
reunited, and so yeah, it's all good. I just probably I'm a coach. So to do things like teaching to ride a bike or teaching to swim or teaching to that just absolutely comes naturally to me.
mm,
And to be fair, um, at those young ages, Oliver spent more time with his mother just in terms of the time splits.
mm,
And so by implication, I spent more time with him than his biological dad.
mm,
So that was just a very sort of normal, natural evolution that I would be teaching those things because I was spending more time with him. And then throw on the fact that my wife says, I'm always a coach.
mm.
So, yeah.
But it sounds like to me that there's been a very kind of mature way of approaching things. I think I've heard a lot of stories, at least from people kind of our generation who have maybe been through their own story of parents divorcing and parents remarrying and kind of having a little bit of trauma coming out of that. Because at the end of the day, when there's a child involved, like they can never be the kind of grown up and making an adult decision, a mature decision. And when there is, I guess, like you alluded to, the idea of someone splitting up another couple, and then this happens, and then parents separate. And I just know so many people that have that story for themselves, and then the one thing they don't want to happen is for that to happen to their kids.
Yeah.
How do you kind of approach things mature, like with a mature mindset, and to ensure? So does your son still see his biological dad, and is there like a stepmom as well?
Yeah. So there is a stepmom, but he sees his biological dad. And we sort of I suppose I wouldn't say intertwined, but we're involved in each other's lives to some level. There's got to be a pickup or a drop off for sort of on those changeover days and stuff. I think what and this had nothing to do with me. I think what really helped the situation is is how the divorce and separation came apart, came around, and it was just sort of two people just growing apart.
Right.
And so there was no animosity, there was no jealousy, everything was pretty amicable. It was, yeah. So I think, and that had nothing to do with me. There was no influence from my side on that. That just happened naturally. So the situation I stepped into was quite easy. And when that's, I'd like to think even if it wasn't, we'd all sort of be adults and go, hey, what's best for the kid, not what's best for a 30 or 40-year-old. That's where our responsibility lies as parents. And if
Yeah,
I'm
for
going to
sure.
take that on as a stepdad, and when my wife and I got married, that was part of it. Is I've been entrusted to look after this young kid.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really good way of looking at things. And you said you felt as though you were stepping into something easy. I'm sure lots of people wouldn't consider kind of getting involved with someone that already has a child and becoming a step parent and kind of coming at parenthood in that kind of different trajectory, let's say. Yep. People might not associate that as being easy. That might be a barrier to lots of people. So it seems as though that wasn't a barrier, and you kind of enjoyed fatherhood, starting fatherhood from that aspect.
I'm the eldest of 5 kids, so you sort of kind of intrinsically are growing up in a situation where you are looking after your younger siblings. So that's always been there. Then I was a coach, and you kind of, I'm not saying it's an exact carryover, but there's some, I don't know, what do you call it, seeds or threads that intertwine between those. I was probably also my age, having dedicated so much of my life to my career. Like I'd never really had a girlfriend or anything like that before this. I was just, focused on work and jobs and sort of working up the ladder, so to speak. So I guess those were factors that kind of made it easier. I was probably ready. And then, for me, I found I probably overestimated the ease in terms of in those early days. One, I'd see Oliver for, what it was a little bit like. If anyone's had a sibling that when you've got kids and then the siblings like the aunt or your own sibling is like an aunt or an uncle, and they think parenting is easy because they see the nephew or niece for a few hours, like that's the easy part. Hey, you got to take them to the park and you got to take them to the, whatever, and you had the fun, but you didn't see them when they were sick or nappies needed to be changed at 2:00 in the morning, or when, it's around dinner time and they're hungry and tired and all that kind of stuff. So, from my side, I probably had a very easy introduction, and I was seeing this cute little kid in the best, around the pool, around the park, around all that kind of stuff. And then for a couple of hours, and then it sort of grew. And then as we spent more time, Leisha and I would go away for maybe a night, and that was to the beach. And so that's another fun place to be. So I feel like, and again, Lawrence, I didn't have anything to do with this. Like this was not some kind of strategic plan. It was just how it evolved. And so I had nothing to do with the breakup and the lack of animosity. I had nothing to do with the situations that I was seeing and interacting with Oliver. That was probably more my wife at the time, kind of organizing that sort of stuff. So it was just like this kind of natural and very easy progression.
Wow. Well, that's really good to hear. And it does sound as though the amicable nature of the separation probably allowed for the kind of integration of new parent figures within your son's life. And that's really good to hear. I like the fact that these sort of stories are coming out. And this is very similar to the other stepfather I chatted to. He sounded very amicable and very mature as well. So, so I'm curious, if you got involved with his life when he was about 18 months, did you have any wake up calls when you had to deal with a newborn when you had your daughter then? What was it? What
Yeah,
the
yeah.
surprises?
Yeah, 100%. That's actually a very good point. Very good question. Um, yeah, I probably severely underestimated the situation, and honestly, I probably didn't give my wife as much support as I should have at that time. Especially because I thought I had this false confidence of thinking I know parenting,
Mm,
and it was totally different. I rarely, um, so I'd say regret because, like, you kind of where you are at now, it's hard to change
mm,
anything. It was impossible to change anything in the past.
mm,
But yeah, and she handled it so well because it was her second pregnancy. So
mm.
she had all these tips. Like one simple thing is she would I remember as I was getting late to term, she was preparing all these meals because she knew how tough it would be. So I would just come home and there'd be frozen meals that had been cooked a few weeks before, and we just heat that up. And I had no real input into that, but her experience allowed us to do that. And then yeah, and then you had my daughter, and I was I had my younger siblings are 9 years younger than me. I've got twin sisters.
Okay. Wow.
So I was aware of, as an older brother, you do some things
Mm,
that maybe that other, if you've got a much smaller gap between siblings, maybe you didn't get to do. So I was aware of a fair amount of those things, and I've got also obviously a few siblings who had kids before me. So, but yeah, it was a wake up call, and to then kind of see, and one other interesting thing that I don't know reflect on is how much harder I was on Oliver, and this is not stepfather or biological or anything like that, but um, with the eldest, you think they should be able to do more. And then the second
mm.
time around, I was like, wow, I can't believe at 3, I thought Oliver should be able to do this or be this independent. Whereas with the
Yeah.
second one, I actually could appreciate how young and she was. Um, so, and yeah, so that was something that I thought was really interesting is, missing those first 18 months, thinking I was ahead of myself in terms of my ability to parent and so forth. And then particularly my, my ability to support my wife, what she was going through all that.
Yeah,
So
that's really interesting. And I think, yeah, obviously the supporting the wife is obviously such a huge thing of being a dad that
it
is,
is.
I guess, I mean, a lot of people talk about it, but it's maybe not as mentioned as much within kind of like parenting spaces and like parenting books. And because a lot of
Yeah.
the parenting books are maybe aimed at the woman anyway, at the mother.
Yeah.
And so, and I think everyone's situation is going to be different, like health wise and logistically, things are going to look kind of similar in terms of how a delivery goes. But then every woman is actually going to be different in terms of what they need and how you kind of communicate that.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that I noticed is how useless I was for the first 2 years of Madison's life. Like like I could at best I could maybe calm her down sometimes, but she just needed mom. Like
Mm,
that's who she needed the whole time. Mom for feeding, mom for comfort, mom for, and that first 2 years, then it doesn't just stop at 2 years. The mom is still, to me, in my experience, has been the most important person, even up to age 10, for comfort. Dad could be there for playing and for kind of, I don't know, some kind of wrestle or maybe pushing
mm,
out of the comfort zone or growing or whatever you want to call it there. But mom is just so important. And like I wasn't bummed about it, but it took me a while to realize, hey, for me to help my daughter as much as I can is really to support my wife as much as I can. That's
yeah.
that's actually sort of the pathway.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, yeah, I think you're right. Like no one probably told me that. No one, like, it was something I had to work out myself. And if
mm,
there's someone about to be a dad or something like that, you're going to be useless for the next few years in your kid's life. But the biggest thing that you can be is support, sort of almost by proxy.
yeah, for sure. And it's interesting you mentioned the first 2 years of life because my youngest just turned 2. He had his birthday a few days ago. And I am a stay-at-home dad. I've been a stay-at-home dad with them since he was about 8 months, 8 or 9 months is when we moved country, and then I took up this role. So like I've been, the primary caregiver for him for that amount of time. Yet there'll still be nights or moments where he'll just like you said, like he needs his mum, and like he
Yep.
needs to run off to mum, and like there'll be times like we're in the bedroom and like I'll be trying to like get him back to sleep, like rocking him, and he'll just kind of break free because he's really strong. Like for a 2-year-old, he's absurdly strong, and he'll just break free and he'll just run off into. It's like I'm not crying about this anymore. I'm just going to go find her. Like
Yeah. But the funny, sorry, Lawrence, like I'm 46 now. My dad's just turned 80. My mom's in her 70s. And I still can see the difference in support that my parents give me in terms of like, so if I need to talk about business or something like that, my dad will be quite factual. He'll sort of pull me up and he'll almost give me a path forward. So he's in South Africa and in Australia, he's run some pretty decent businesses. Whereas my mother's there, she will, I don't want to say console. I don't know what the word is, but it's definitely more emotional. I know I get two different types of support from my parents, and that's me as a 46-year-old to an 80-year-old and a 74-year-old, 72-year-old. Sorry, I'm not going to have 2 years there, but like I think that's fairly consistent to be in that situation. I think that's what it is, and it's just amplified it in those early years.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that kind of does shift it quite a lot, which I think is quite consistent with dads that I've spoken to, is when there are two that are fairly close, that the older one maybe does get a little bit more attached to dad because of the pregnancy and the birth and the newborn.
Yeah.
I had a friend whose wife, unfortunately, had she had to have surgery while she was pregnant, and then that had quite a long bed rest time of like months and months and months. So it meant he was the primary caregiver for his like at the age 2-year-old. And from that point on, like he was then really like daddy, 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 because unfortunately his mum couldn't care for him because she was bedridden and pregnant, and just like such a it's an insane story, but I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's not my story to share. But it does just kind of like there are things that can happen, I think, that kind of make maybe an older sibling kind of gravitate towards the father a little bit more. But yeah, you just don't know what's going to happen, and you can't control these things, and you can't manufacture the connection. You kind of just have to adapt, and I think that's the thing that can get quite difficult when you're trying to put systems in place to allow a parent to have time off, or allow the parent to get home from work and decompress and have time for themselves, or to go and do this, or go and work on this thing, or whatever it might be. And the child is still kind of needing that other parent. It does make it a little bit difficult. And it's obviously the most important thing. If anyone does relate to this, any listener, is you can't take it personally. Like as soon as you start taking it personally, then it's a slippery slope when you start doubting yourself as a parent.
Oh, well, yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things is not take it personally. Even, if there's a meltdown or if there's whatever. And this is where, to me, I think if people are taking it personally, I think there's a lack of emotional development on that person's side. I really do believe that. Like, I think, right now, we're probably in an environment where feelings trump facts and all this kind of stuff. And the what's it called? I'm offended and all this kind of stuff. I feel like it's all connected. Ricky Gervais got a great little clip on that. But like, man, it's a 5-year-old or it's a kid or I'm not talking about the actions of a 22-year-old. I'm talking about the actions of someone who they don't have emotional control, and you need to have emotion, and you should have emotional control. And if they say, I don't know, I hope it doesn't happen, but I hate you or anything like that, no, they don't. That's just how they're feeling right now. And they don't have the control to do it. And you just got to go, hey, that's okay, but you're going to still eat your dinner. Or you're still going to, you just follow on with what a mature person would do. And I think that's sort of hopefully anyone listening is working on that so that they don't have that um, sort of knee-jerk, immature kind of, I take it personally, I'm getting offended reaction. It's just, no, I'm the parent. And yeah.
I'm not a brain expert or a brain surgeon, but like I've done a tiny bit of studying into like kind of neuroplasticity and how neural pathways are formed for like emotional responses, and your emotional response that you've done the most amount of times is the easiest thing to do, because like your brain, like a muscle, when you're training
Yes.
something, it's just used to doing it. That's what it's going to do. So like you have that response because your brain is used to doing that response, and that could be shouting, it could be running away, it could be crying awake, whatever it might be. And you kind of have to understand that and be the adult, because your brain is more developed than, like you said, a
Yes.
5-year-old's whose brain is like so much more like immature compared to us. And yeah, I mean, we're not saying this is easy.
No one's saying it, but it is worth it.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. It's definitely worth it. So talking about training a little bit, I wanted to loop back into how you said you were a coach. And I just wanted to find out if you have found there to be any transferable skills. You mentioned kind of coaching and fatherhood and what that kind of looks like. How have you found like kind of stepping out as being a parent and becoming a parent versus your time as a coach, and not just coaching anyone, but kind of this kind of very high level that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I in the beginning, when I was first with Oliver, I found coaching had given me it forced me to think about certain things. So, for example, I had very strong opinions on independence, and so my athletes were always coached to be independent. And the example I used to use: if I get taken up by a bus, you should still be able to train. You should still understand. So, I worked with a young tennis player who, Ash Barty. She went on to become world number one. Now, I wasn't working with her when she was world number one. I was working with her when she was a young athlete, but she did win junior Wimbledon, and she would have been 14 at the time. And junior Wimbledon's under 18, so that's a pretty good to win as a 14-year-old in under 18 competition. And in the 6 weeks leading up to junior Wimbledon, she planned her gym program. Now, I oversaw it, but we'd been working for about 3 or 4 years together by that stage, and she understood exactly what was required. And so she would take me through why she chose those exercises and those sets and those reps and so forth. Anyway, where I'm going with this is I've always believed independence and teaching people to be independent has been like underpinned my coaching philosophy. And I've took that over to parenting. But now, Lawrence, have you come across a guy? I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Gabor Mate, Mate.
I think, yeah, that rings a bell. I've definitely heard of him.
I think he's from the Czech Republic. I think he lives in Canada now, and he might have been on the Joe Rogan podcast once or twice. And he's got some amazing audio I use audiobooks for driving, but he's got some amazing books on the topic, and he's forced me to rethink a lot of this. And I'm still not clear where I am. So I'll tell you, Gabor's book is honestly one of the longest books I've ever read, not because of its duration, but he would say a statement, and my initial thought was, I disagree with this. I'd press pause and I'd fight with it in my head. What he was saying, what I think, what I believe, all this kind of stuff. And then eventually I'd kind of like have to admit, I've been doing this wrong. I'm gonna have to change my philosophy on this. And then I'd listen to like the next sentence, and so anyway, this process was going on. Coming back to your question, I think at a level, the coaching forced me to think about things that are quite prevalent / prominent / useful in parenting. And it's not to say that I had the right thoughts or anything like that. I was exposed to the kind of thinking to be, like this emotional control, exactly what we've talked about. One of my worst things in sport is when I don't know, you're watching the football match, or whatever, and they film the coach, and the coach is throwing things and performing on the sideline. And I'm going, wait a second. So you expect your athletes to think clearly, not give away the penalty, to behave in a very controlled manner, and you up in the box or on the sideline yelling and performing. Like, No,
Mm.
you got to lead from the front. And so that thinking, I believe, same thing with the parent. If you see the parent throwing things, what authority do you have of the 3-year-old who's having a tantrum? Like
Yeah.
zero. You've got absolutely nothing. So it was those kind of things that I had thought about, and I have changed some of my mind on things. But it's I think it's more the fact that I had engaged with those thought processes already.
Mm.
Um, it is a little bit different as a parent, and
Mm.
sometimes it's so well, everyone knows this. When you see in the restaurant and someone's behaving badly, and you think, "This is what I would do as if I was a parent," or when you're out with friends and they got kids, you're super super confident of what you would do in every situation. And as a
Mm.
parent, you're like, "Okay, this is not
Yeah.
exactly as black and white as I thought." A similar sort of thing happened to me with coaching. Like
Mm.
when I was so strong, and part of my role with when I was employed and contracted to these national sporting organizations was to educate the parents. And I had this such a black
Mm.
and white. This is what you do. It's easy. You just do this, and then you become a parent. You're like, so when the other sibling's sick and this has happened and that's happened, now are you going to do that same thing that has been recommended?
Yeah. Your answer reminds me a lot of I was a teacher before becoming a stay-at-home dad, so I was a primary school teacher. So a lot of people would ask
Did you have
me,
strong opinions like before? Was it so? This is before you had kids?
yes. So I became a teacher. I used to work in sales, and then I did when we moved to Hong Kong, I did a English teaching qualification. So then I was doing that, and then I was training to become a fully qualified classroom teacher when my first son was born.
Okay.
So like it kind of a lot of it was, I guess, being grown at the similar times, I guess. Hello, did you know you can get access to the Dad Dialogue interviews a whole week early via the Dad Dialogue Patreon? It is a new thing that has been set up this year in 2025. The links will be in the description. There are also some other tiers in there that you can get your hands on by signing up. Really appreciate any support you have to give to the show. Go up over there and sign up. Links in the description. Let's get back to the conversation. A lot of people would ask me that same thing, like, do the skills you have from teaching kind of cross over into being a parent? And I think kind of similar, like there are some skills that are transferable that like they kind of exist in a similar space, but the role is still a different role, and you still need the
Yeah.
kind of boundaries in place. Like you as a coach to a child or a young person is not their parent or their teacher, and the teacher's not the parent or the coach. Like, and there are certain boundaries in place for these different roles. And I think that's when, as a teacher or as a coach, then it can get difficult when the parent is trying to step into that other role of
Yes.
no, like, trust me, I'm the qualified teacher here. Like, this is like, let me do what I need to do. You can do what you need to do, kind of thing. So I assume that's a kind of a similar aspect from a coach. You can't kind of have that too much crossover.
Yes. I mean, definitely from a coaching perspective, I if I'm wearing my coach's hats and I'm talking about a kid and talking to a parent, um, I don't. That parent's primary role is to love their kid.
Yeah.
The technical or the tactical aspects of the sport are so far down the totem pole of
Mm.
what their kid needs. And so while the parent might be doing whatever on the sidelines or making suggestions or having these discussions on the way to or from training or playing or competition, I'm just saying, no, your job is just to love your kid.
Yeah.
And that's that can be it's not a tough job in terms of loving a kid, but there are times where you can just be like, whoa, they behave badly or whatever the case is, or so just you focus on that. Let
Mm.
me focus on the tactics and the technical or the physical or the mental aspects of the sport. That's my role, and
Mm.
the clearer we can have those. I do like support, and I'm going to support you, but there's a boundary there,
Mm.
and provide them food and love and home and all that kind of stuff that they need that. And for their life, that's way more important than anything I'm providing as a coach.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And how do you envisage kind of, or how do you involve sports with your own kids? I'm assuming you would encourage them to get involved, but do you ever find yourself having to kind of like take a little step back to make sure you don't kind of maybe press in a little bit too hard if you're trying to encourage them to get involved?
Um, No, Lawrence, you've caught me at a time here where I've got some thoughts that are not fully clear in my mind, and I'll explain them. Uh, I almost, and I say this sort of facetiously, I almost don't think kids' sports should exist for under 10-year-olds. And what I mean
Mm,
by that is I think I'll tell you what shouldn't exist is these high level academies for under 10-year-olds. Like
mm,
that's to me, I'm quite clear on my thoughts on that. Like the kid's 9.
mm,
Um, so very basically you've got sports that are you require that are early exposure sports, and typically swimming and tennis is an early exposure sports. And you've got early specialization sports like gymnastics, and in gymnastics, if you start at age 12, sorry, it's too late. Like there's going to be
right.
a ceiling that you're going to hit. But for most sports, I just think they that shouldn't exist because it should be wrestling or playing with mom or dad or other kids and hopefully cousins and stuff like that in the backyard.
Mm,
That's where the vast majority of it should be. And so that's kind of the approach I've had with the kids. Um, we've most of the kids swimming has been in our backyard pool.
right.
And now we've just this year, as a 12-year-old, we've signed my son up for some swimming correction things because it's beyond what I know in this in the stroke, and we've only got like the length of our pool is 8 meters. So,
Right.
but almost everything that we've done has been okay. Go to the bottom of the pool, and we've picked up things, and we've wrestled, and we've done things in the water, and we've raced, and we've done things like that. So, and my 9-year-old daughter, just by virtue, she does one swimming lesson a week, and it's stroke correction. It's not really training. And again, that's because it's beyond me in terms of the technical aspects
Mm,
and of swimming. With jujitsu, my son goes once or twice a week, but a lot of the time we wrestle on the trampoline, and I have like I'll hold a soccer ball, and the two kids have got to kind of get the ball off me,
mm,
and obviously I'm like I give it to them sometimes and so forth. But yeah, so that's how that happens.
mm,
In terms, tennis would be an early exposure sport, and uh, to be fair, we've probably missed the boat if we want, but they could still do it. So what I'm saying is like we've exposed them to the sport. If we've signed them up for the sport, it's a bare minimum that we can get them there because the expectation is we doing that at home or that's happening with friends or and so forth. We've tried to stay away from my daughter does do dancing, and again, if you saw me dance, you'd understand why. We've got to, you know, yeah. I can catch and kick most things, but I struggle to move my body in rhythm to a in time with the rhythm. But yeah, so I haven't actually had to step back too much
mm,
because it's been quite game based, quite
mm,
unstructured in the backyard, or sometimes we clear the dining room, not the dining room table, like the lounge room table, coffee table, and then we just wrestle on the mat or we do something there, and that's how it is, rather than anything structured. And then that obviously means like even when my kids do jujitsu, um, most of the time I'm just chatting to other parents or something like that. And the only real thing that I'll involve myself in is if behavior is not good.
mm,
The technical and tactical stuff, that's all up to the coach. So that's been quite easy for me.
mm. Yeah, it sounds like a very deliberate approach to ensure that things are remaining fun. And I think what I really like about what you've just shared that maybe isn't super obvious, at least maybe to you, is that this is probably not the tougher one, but it's more involved. It's probably easier for a parent to sign the kids up to lots of different classes and drive them around and drop them off for 2 hours Tuesdays and Thursdays for classes here, there, and everywhere for football and tennis and rugby or whatever it might be. But you're kind of being deliberate about, I'm here. We can do this stuff. We can make our home fun. We can get involved with sports and like we
Yeah,
can make it a whole holistic approach to it. Which I think is not the easy way to do. I think a lot of people might find it easier. It's like, oh, let's free up our Tuesday evening by dropping the kids off at swimming or whatever.
yeah, yeah. No, it is true. Um, and it has been quite deliberate because in my career, so I think this is my 25th or 26 year of coaching, and obviously there's been a fair amount of junior athletes. I've seen the ones who peaked at age 12
Wow.
or peaked at age 14 or whatever. And, there was a kid that I worked with who loved rugby, and he graduated school and he got a contract with a professional team, and he lasted 4 days with his
Wow.
professional team, and he was just sick of it. He was just like, I've had too much of it.
Hmm.
And I was a much younger coach then, I was probably even part of the problem. He wanted to train. I said, let's go train. Now my approach is like, I want to hold you back as much as possible. I want to get you to do it's called the mini max approach, the minimum effort for the maximum result. So if you can give me 2 sessions a week and we can get 80%, well, I'm not going to go for 3 sessions and get 90%. Minimum effort, 2 sessions for 80, way better than, 3 sessions for 90. Yeah. And so I've seen all that. And so from my side, I think it's way more important just to interact and engage with the kids and love them and play, and they'll have a way healthier um, outlook on life. I'm hoping. Who knows?
Hmm.
In a few years' time, it could all backfire.
Well, no, I think I think they will have a healthier approach for sure. And I think, yeah, that's because it's something that I'm interested in, because I have younger kids that are not at that stage yet of getting involved in things. And I've said to a few guests before, like the approach of getting them involved in something outside of like their normal class, whether that be music or sports or even like a hobby, like a building hobby, like a STEM hobby or whatever it might be. And that kind of is like not trying to teach them determination and the kind of thoroughness, let's say, of not wanting to quit on something. And I think that's a very valuable thing to teach kids. But yes, if it's like this, like you're talking about with these academies or hyper focus, train this, train that, I'm sure that some very stressful stories involved there. So you said maximum effort for maximum output, or minimum effort for maximum output.
Yeah.
So what's the tips for the dads out there that need that minimum effort for maximum output? What does that look like for their health?
Oh, okay. So you know the analogy of the big rocks. You've heard of that analogy where the professor stands in front of the class and he's got like a big beaker or something, and he puts some rocks in the beaker and he says, "Is this full?" And the class go, "Yes." And then he manages to put in some pebbles, and he shakes in the pebbles, kind of filling. Says, "Is this full?" And he says, "Yeah." And then he puts in some sand, so smaller things, and then the sand still fits in, even though at each stage it looks like it's full. And apparently in this story, he also then puts in a beer, and he says, no matter how full your beaker is, there's always time for a beer. But anyway, the big rocks analogy is something that I'd be looking at. And so in terms of minimum effort, I mean, for maximum results and a physical and the health perspective, you'd be looking at if everyone could get 2 strength training sessions in a week, go to the gym, strength training, train your upper body, train your lower body twice a week, probably for a maximum of an hour, so 30 minutes each. In fact, this is what we offer in our gym. Our adult memberships are 30-minute sessions, total body. We've got only 2 memberships, twice a week and 3 times a week. That's the only thing that you can choose. And I would say 95%. I'm trying to get most people just to commit to 2 sessions a week. If you can do that, build some strength, build some muscle, and you can, and the dentist appointment never comes in that, like, never sort of cancels out your gym. So like, it's just prioritized. That over years is going to give you way better gains than these 8-week boot camps and, the fitness challenge over here and kind of super motivated. Like, Lawrence, you know that the vast majority of people will not will not finish 12 weeks of their program. So this is why all these big commercial gyms want to sign you up for a year at a very low cost. And then it's actually when you call up and you realize you haven't been there for 3 months, and you try to cancel, they make it almost impossible to cancel. Put you on hold and fill out this form, and you go, oh man, it's too different. Anyway, coming back to the big rocks, coming back to the mini max principle. If every dad could just go 2 sessions a week, full body. And when I say full body, I'm talking about the exercise like a dumbbell bench press, a push up, an incline press. These will all be your pushing muscles. Then you'd flip over and do your pulling muscles. So this would be like a chin up, seated row, lat pull down, something along those lines. And then some kind of leg exercise, squat, lunge, or deadlift. If you could do that, one of those three categories. You could throw in some extra stuff like more some trunk work, whatever. Do that twice a week, build some muscle. Maximum total time in the gym would be an hour. In fact, if your gym session is longer than 45 minutes and you're not an elite athlete, you're not training hard enough. But in 45 minutes, you've done enough. You should have done enough. Otherwise, you spend too much time scrolling social media, or you're just not working hard enough. So that there's a very simple mini-max principle that will have massive benefits on your cardiac health, your blood work, muscle gain, insulin response. That'd be the big thing. Flip that, and then you start looking at nutrition. And if you want to talk mini-max there, you just make sure that you're essentially maximizing your protein content of your nutrition. There's your big rock. You've got 3 macronutrients: protein, carbohydrates, fats. Lawrence, between you and me, we never need to eat another carbohydrate, and we'll be fine from a health perspective. Performance might be different, but health. So your bread, rice, pasta, potato, you don't have to worry about that. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying that at all. It's just from a nutritional point of view, they're non-essential. You don't have to eat them. Fats, there's some essential fatty acids, and you have to eat those. And they're protein. So big rocks there is if you look at your plate, it should be majority protein. So if you and your wife invited my wife and I over for dinner and you cooked a spaghetti bolognese, and your wife's got, or whoever's gone to the prepared it, I would still eat it. But what you might notice is I'll just have a little bit less of the pasta and a little bit more of the meat. Like I'll just change the proportion. I'd still be respectful. I'd still, appreciate that someone's cooked a meal for me and stuff. But the big rock there is to maximize your protein content. And so if you did your strength training, your nutrition, and then the last thing that I really recommend is, it's one thing to train. That's 100% important. But I call that physical exercise. The other one is physical activity. And the simple thing there is get your 10,000 steps. If you look at the evidence, the 10,000 steps was really good, but the benefits increased at 11, 12, 13,000. I think you're up to 17,000 steps. You're still getting benefits. So, if you can do that, and that's accumulative over the day. So it doesn't have to be, hey guys, wife, whatever, I'm going out for 2 hours to get these. It could be before breakfast, before the kids wake up. It could be middle of the day. It could be over your lunch break. It could be, way you set it up, your day. There's 3 big rocks. Oh, what are 3 mini maxes?
No, that's awesome. And I think, as I said to you before, I think it is something that we as fathers do need to think about, because longevity is super important, and not just kind of being here, but being here and being able to wrestle with our kids when they're teenagers and things. These things don't just happen by mistake. I don't want to be that dad in 10 years that's like got a bad back that can't get on the floor and wrestle with the kids. So these questions kind of come from like a genuine place for me. And I think it's super important.
Lawrence, just on that. So I was a lifeguard in South Africa for 5 seasons. And one of the things that was drummed into us, and it sounds counterintuitive the first time you hear it, it's save yourself first. And I'll give you an example. It was definitely my first season. And New Year's Day, if anyone wants to do this, Google image Durban New Year's Day. Okay. And look at how packed the beaches are. You won't believe it. It's almost like a football stadium on the beach. And the rescues that we would do, I don't know, 50, 100, I don't know how many, you were just working the whole day. Anyway, on this particular New Year's Day rescue, I had to run maybe 400, 500 meters, swam out to back line. So that's maybe another 50 or 60 meters. And what's meant to happen is, as I get close to you, I have a torpedo buoy, like a float attached to me, and I get close enough to you and I throw the torpedo buoy to you, and then you can grab onto that. So now you're not going to drown, and we can have a discussion or whatever needs to happen, and then I'll swim you back. And I just got too close to the victim, and he grabbed me and he pushed me down to push him. He wasn't trying to push me down. He was trying to push himself up to get air. And my lungs were bursting. I had battery acid pumping through my veins. And this guy's taking me down. And long story short, I had to punch him, and then settle him down, swim away, calm him down, and then, and I don't blame the guy. It was just pure panic.
Mm,
I blame me. But if he had managed to hold me down, we would have lost 2 lives then.
mm,
And this is my analogy for parents: is there needs to be some level of selfishness. Now, I'm not talking selfishness of watching Netflix.
yeah.
That's consuming.
Mm,
You need a selfishness to create, and that's have some kind of creative outlet, create your fitness routine or whatever the case is. There's the doing aspect, not just the sort of sitting and having it done for me. So, for example, I'm not going to give you too much leeway with a massage, but if you're going to gym, there's a level of selfishness there. And if your kid, then that's where they're doing their sport, or they have to do a little bit of, they have to be watched by, like sometimes those gyms have a creche or whatever it is, whatever
yeah.
the case is, for you to get your gym done or your strength work, there needs to be, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after your kids. And we know the mental and the emotional benefits of that physical work, as an example,
Mm,
huge. And so just like the lifeguard, you have to at some point save yourself. And again, I'm not talking about a night drinking. I'm not talking about Netflix, sitting on the couch. I'm not talking any of those sort of passive, pseudo relaxing things. I'm talking about, and you'll feel better. You get
yeah.
back from a big day's work, and if you go for a walk or hit gym or something like that, you'll feel better. Your emotional control will be better. It actually gives you energy. It really does. And so that level of selfishness needs to be adopted in the right way for
Mm.
parents and dads, especially to be the best dad that they can be.
No, that's couldn't say about it myself, and it's not easy, and I'm kind of struggling with this myself, like battling, kind of fitting in this time. One of my solutions, I bought myself like a barbell and
Yep.
some big weights, and I got them under my bed. So I'll
Some
just
big weights, huh?
well, not that big. I think everything on the bar and the bar is like 50. So
Yep.
like when I can get myself in gear, like I'll just get that out and do some deadlifts and some shoulder presses or whatever. And it's not great. And honestly, like before I got married, I used to go to the gym lots and lots and lots and lots. So like it's all kind of in there somewhere, but it's just making that time, and it's not finding time; it is making time, obviously.
Exactly.
Um,
It's not a passive thing; it's an active thing. Like, I'll create the time. We'll make it. Yeah.
the one decision that I am quite selfish with, where I live in the Netherlands, is obviously cycling is such a big thing here, and I really like the fact of not having to have a car. So what I have
Mhm.
is a cargo bike, and it's this really long thing with this bucket in the middle where I put my 2 kids, and then I cycle them around town. That's how I like drop them off at preschool. It's how I do all our groceries, and it has a battery, so I can like put the motor on, but then I can put the motor down if I want to like work a little bit harder.
Mhm.
And that just, it's like you said, that's the activity. That's not like the training, but
Yeah.
that's just the activity of like just knowing that in a different life I might be sitting behind the wheel of a car, knowing that for me, and I get the fresh air, like that's a real big benefit for me. And like that's the kind of selfish thing of like I kind of like it here, almost simply just because of that fact. And if we can't have that part of our life, it might be difficult to kind of change because we move around a lot.
Yeah. Uh, Australia is horrible from that perspective, because it's such a car-driven driving society,
Mm.
especially with the space and stuff like that. So, yeah, I envy that,
It's
which is right.
such a useful part of our life for sure. So as we kind of come towards the end of our time together, I like to always ask the dads to think back at the time before they became a dad. It will be a little bit different for you because obviously you kind of came into your son's life when he was about 18 months old. So think back, I guess, before you would have met him for the first time. What advice do you think Grant back then needed to hear before kind of stepping into the role as a father? And then even if there might be an extra piece of advice for before having your daughter and having your newborn. So maybe a double barrel question there if anything stands out to you.
Probably what we touched on earlier on is just how much support I should be giving to the mother, to my wife. That to me was such a big one. It'll be something that I'll when I've taken a lot of interns. A lot of my younger athletes are now becoming, more mature adults and stuff like that. And that is my message is I neglected. And because my wife was so competent in that space, I didn't appreciate how difficult it was. And it was only sort of when I almost peeked behind the curtain kind of that I realized it. And again, at that stage, while I wasn't as career focused, I was still business focused. I was trying to build my business for the sort of almost second part of my career from employment to the private sector. And so I wasn't aware of it. And then I was really busy anyway. And so that would be my advice is be that support person, and then watch your kids thrive. Because when you're, and I don't believe in this happy wife, happy life kind of superficial, I don't know, kind of thing. Yeah. But I mean, just genuine support. And when your wife feels supported and cared for and all that kind of stuff, the kids just do better.
And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. Of course, a huge thank you goes out to Grant for coming on the show and sharing his stories with us today. I found it super interesting talking to Grant. One of the things that really stuck out for me from our conversation was his view of competitive sports at a young level and how his background in coaching has kind of led him to view young people's sports, or at least sports for children, at this kind of elite level as not being necessary, as not being something that is very worthwhile for young children to get into. And the way that he approaches sport and exercise with his family, I find super inspiring, and definitely something that I hope to achieve when my kids are a little bit older as well. So I really appreciated hearing from Grant on that, and I also really appreciate his outlook on exercise and nutrition for a busy parent lifestyle. I think he's really simplified it in that sense of minimum input to maximum output. Train for 2 30-minute sessions a week, and maximize your protein for food, try and limit your carbs, and that's kind of the basic rules to follow. Makes it quite a bit more simpler than I think a lot of people would often say. So I really appreciated hearing from Grant. If you want to learn more about Grant and the work that he does, the links will be in the description, but he told me to share with you wonderfoodsau.com to learn more about what his company can provide for you, especially if you are based in Australia. So yeah, I really do appreciate Grant sharing so much with us. It was a super interesting conversation. Reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to talk to me, get in touch with me, or be a guest on a future episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.